What if I told you that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't discovering fire or inventing the wheel, but forgetting? Forgetting so completely, so catastrophically, that we turned our own teachers into myths. Scientists just developed a new method to detect ancient civilizations, and what they found should terrify you. Not because something might be out there, but because something was already here, millions of years before we existed, and the evidence has been staring us in the face this entire time. Hit that like button right now, because what I'm about to show you will make you question everything you thought you knew about human history. Here's the thing nobody wants to talk about. Every major university, every archaeological institution, every textbook you've ever read operates on one simple assumption: that humans are special, that we're the first, that intelligence on Earth started with us about 300,000 years ago when Homo sapiens showed up. But there's a problem with that story. A massive, uncomfortable problem that keeps getting bigger every single year. In 2018, two scientists, an astrophysicist named Adam Frank and a climatologist named Gavin Schmidt, published something that made the entire scientific community go quiet. They called it the Silurian hypothesis. No, it's not named after aliens or conspiracy theories. It's named after a Doctor Who episode, which is somehow even weirder. But here's what they asked. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth tens of millions of years ago, would we even be able to detect it? And their answer shocked everyone, probably not. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a civilization that could have built cities, created technology, maybe even achieved spaceflight. And after just a few million years, almost every trace would be gone, completely erased by the Earth itself. Buildings crumble, roads crack, even steel and concrete eventually turn to dust. The Earth's surface is constantly recycling itself through erosion, sedimentation, and tectonic activity. After about 10 million years, the chance of finding a building, a machine, or even a tool approaches zero. So how would you even look for something like that? This is where it gets interesting. You wouldn't look for buildings or artifacts. You'd look for chemical fingerprints, isotope anomalies, spikes in the geological record that shouldn't be there. And guess what? We're finding them everywhere. Let me paint you a picture of what scientists are actually looking at right now. About 55 million years ago, something happened. We call it the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. The planet suddenly heated up by about 5 to 8 degrees Celsius in just a few thousand years. Ocean chemistry went haywire. Massive amounts of carbon flooded into the atmosphere. Species went extinct. It looked almost identical to what we're doing to the planet right now. But here's the kicker. When they study the carbon isotopes from that period, they found something strange. The carbon showed a signature that looks exactly like what happens when you burn fossil fuels, a negative excursion in the carbon-13 ratio. Now, mainstream science says this was probably methane hydrates releasing from the ocean floor, or maybe massive volcanic activity, natural causes. But the Silurian hypothesis asks a different question. What if it wasn't natural? What if someone was burning coal and oil 55 million years ago? I know what you're thinking. That's insane, that's impossible, but stay with me. Because that's just one example. There are multiple hyperthermal events in Earth's history: sudden temperature spikes, carbon anomalies, mass extinctions followed by rapid rebounds, and they all share the same weird signature. Frank and Schmidt created a chart. On one side, they listed all the chemical traces that modern human civilization is currently leaving behind. Things like synthetic polymers, microplastics, rare earth element concentrations, specific metal enrichments from smelting, and radioactive isotopes from nuclear activity. On the other side, they calculated how long each of these traces would last in the geological record. Some of them, like plutonium-244, could last 80 million years. Others, like microplastics, would break down much faster but leave chemical signatures. The point is, if you knew what to look for, you could detect an industrial civilization millions of years after it vanished. But nobody's been looking until now. A small group of researchers started digging through old geological surveys, reanalyzing ancient rock layers, looking for anomalies that previous scientists dismissed as natural flukes. And they started finding things that don't make sense. Spikes in copper, chromium, and cadmium in layers where there should be none. Unusual concentrations of rare earth elements in sediments millions of years old. Organic compounds that look suspiciously like synthetic materials. Each one by itself could be explained away. But when you start stacking them up, when you see the patterns repeat across different time periods and different locations, the coincidences start to feel less like coincidences. Now I need to be very clear about something. This doesn't prove anything. Not yet. Science doesn't work that way. You need extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. But what it does do is open a door that's been locked shut by assumption for over a century. The assumption that we're first, that intelligence is rare, that Earth's 4.5 billion year history only got interesting when we showed up. What if that assumption is wrong? Okay, so geological chemistry is one thing. Weird carbon spikes from millions of years ago are interesting, but they're abstract, hard to visualize. But there's another category of evidence that's much more concrete, much more in your face, and much more controversial. I'm talking about anomalous archaeology, sites that don't fit the timeline, artifacts that shouldn't exist, places where the story we've been told starts to crack. Let me take you to California, 1992. A construction crew is digging a freeway expansion in San Diego when they hit something. Bones, big ones, mastodon bones to be exact. Paleontologists get called in and what they find blows their minds. The bones aren't just fossils lying there naturally. They've been broken, deliberately. Spiral fractures, impact notches, the kind of damage you only get when you're smashing fresh bones to extract marrow. And scattered around the bones are 5 large cobblestones, hammerstones and anvils, tools. They date the bones using uranium-thorium dating, multiple samples, different labs. The result keeps coming back the same, 130,700 years old, plus or minus 9,400 years. Here's the problem. Humans weren't supposed to be in the Americas 130,000 years ago. The accepted timeline says the first people arrived maybe 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, crossing the Bering Land Bridge from Asia. This site predates that by over 100,000 years. So who broke those bones? The paper was published in Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, and the backlash was immediate and brutal. Critics said the fractures could be natural, maybe sediment pressure, maybe construction equipment damaged them, maybe the stones were just rocks that happened to be there. But the team who excavated it pushed back. They showed refitting bone fragments, pieces that fit together like a jigsaw puzzle, all clustered around the anvil stones. They documented the exact position of everything before it was moved. The spatial distribution, they argued, was not random. This wasn't just a mastodon that died and happened to have some rocks nearby. This was a butchering site. Someone processed this animal. Someone with tool-making ability and enough strength to crack massive bones. The question isn't whether someone was there. The question is who. Because anatomically modern humans didn't exist 130,000 years ago. Homo sapiens was just starting to evolve in Africa. So if something with human-level intelligence was in California at that time, it wasn't us. Could it have been Neanderthals, Denisovans, some other hominin species we haven't discovered yet? Maybe. Or maybe it was something we're not ready to classify. The Saruti mastodon site is just one example. There are dozens more. Hundreds, if you start counting the ones that never made it into mainstream journals because they were too controversial. In Brazil, there's a rock shelter called Pedra Furada. Excavations there produced evidence of human occupation going back 48,000 to 60,000 years. Stone tools, fire pits, charcoal. But the site sits at the base of a cliff, and critics say the tools are just rocks that fell and broke naturally. The dating is disputed. The interpretation is disputed, but the site keeps producing evidence that doesn't fit. In Indonesia, there's a megalithic structure called Gunung Padang. Ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography showed buried chambers and walls beneath the surface. Soil samples were radiocarbon dated. Some came back 25,000 years old. The paper was published in Archaeological Prospection. Then it was retracted. The reason? The dating samples were from disturbed soil, not clearly connected to the structure itself. Geologists said the pyramid was actually a natural hill, formed by columnar basalt. The ancient cement between stones was just chemical weathering. Case closed, right? Except the retraction didn't address all the data. It didn't explain the perfectly aligned chambers. It didn't explain why the structure's geometry matches artificial construction so closely. It just said the dating was unreliable, which is fair. But unreliable dating doesn't mean natural formation. It means we don't know. Here's the pattern I want you to notice. Every time one of these anomalous sites gets discovered, the same thing happens. Initial excitement, media coverage, then a wave of criticism, debunking, alternative explanations, and eventually the site fades from public consciousness, filed away as interesting but unproven. But they never fully go away. They sit there in the archaeological record like splinters, little pieces of evidence that don't fit the story but can't be completely removed either. And the more you dig, the more you realize there are a lot of splinters. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: the timeline of human intelligence itself. We like to think of human evolution as a smooth progression. Australopithecus to Homo habilis to Homo erectus to us. Each step a little smarter, a little more capable. But that's not what the archaeological record actually shows. About 1.8 million years ago, hominins start making Acheulean hand axes. Symmetrical, well-crafted tools that require planning and foresight. These tools stay virtually unchanged for over 1 million years. Same design, same technique, all across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Then, about 400,000 to 300,000 years ago, something changes. Fire becomes habitual. The Levallois technique appears, a method of stone knapping that requires preparing a core in advance to produce specific flake shapes. This is advanced cognitive planning. Then, around 140,000 years ago, another leap: hafting. Combining different materials into composite tools, ornaments, symbolic behavior, the beginning of art and storytelling. These aren't gradual changes. They're jumps, big ones, and nobody really knows why they happen when they do. Here's the uncomfortable question archaeologists don't like to ask. What if the jumps are so big because something was teaching them? There's a principle in archaeology called minimum competence. You can only assess the minimum cognitive ability required to produce an artifact. If someone makes a stone hand axe, you know they had at least enough intelligence to make a stone hand axe, but you don't know how much more intelligent they might have been. What if early hominins were far smarter than we give them credit for? What if their cleverest thinking went into things that don't preserve? Organic technology, complex oral traditions, social structures, all invisible to archaeology. Or here's the even weirder possibility: what if they were getting help? Because there's another pattern in the archaeological record that nobody talks about: the sudden appearance of agriculture. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were hunter-gatherers. Then, around 10,000 BCE, multiple civilizations across the globe suddenly start farming. wheat in the Fertile Crescent, rice in China, maize in Mesoamerica, potatoes in the Andes, all within a few thousand years of each other. Coincidence? Maybe, but it's a hell of a coincidence. And it gets weirder, because the early farmers had knowledge they shouldn't have had. They knew about crop rotation, selective breeding, irrigation systems, astronomical calendars to track planting seasons. The Sumerians, one of the first civilizations, had a sexagesimal math system, base 60. We still use it today for measuring time and angles. They could calculate square roots and compound interest thousands of years before anyone else. Their own texts say they didn't invent it. They were taught by beings called the Apkallu, fish-garbed sages who came from the sea and gave them the knowledge of civilization. Now, mainstream scholars say these are just myths, metaphors, symbolic representations of cultural heroes or legendary teachers. But what if they're not metaphors? What if they're memories? This is where things get really strange. Because if you start looking at mythology not as fiction, but as a historical record, patterns emerge. Global patterns. A researcher named Yuri Berezkin spent his career building a massive database of folklore motifs. Over 2,000 motifs from nearly 1,000 traditions worldwide. And when you analyze the data, something incredible appears. Myths don't spread randomly. They follow specific routes that match population movements and genetic patterns. Some myths can be traced back to migrations from 38,000 years ago. Some even older, potentially, to the initial human expansion out of Africa 60,000 years ago. Mythology, it turns out, is a cultural fossil record. Stories can preserve information for tens of thousands of years. And one story appears everywhere, on every inhabited continent, told by cultures that had zero contact with each other. The story of the teachers who came before. In Mesopotamia, they're called the Apkallu, 7 sages who lived before the Great Flood. They came from the Apsu, the cosmic ocean, wearing fish cloaks. They taught humanity writing, astronomy, medicine, and ritual. After the flood, they returned to the deep. In Jewish tradition, they're the Watchers, the sons of God who descended, mated with human women and taught forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, weaponry, cosmetics, sorcery. They were punished and imprisoned beneath the earth. In Egypt, they're the Neteru, the gods who ruled in the Zep Tepi the first time. They gave the Egyptians the knowledge of the stars, the construction of temples, and the practice of sacred kingship. In India, they're the Rishis and the Nagas, serpent beings who lived in underwater cities and shared advanced knowledge with select humans. In Mesoamerica, they're Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan, the feathered serpent gods who taught agriculture, astronomy, and calendar systems before departing over the sea. In the Andes, it's Viracocha, the pale bearded god who emerged from Lake Titicaca after a flood created humanity, taught civilization, and walked across the Pacific. In West Africa, the Dogon speak of the Namo, amphibious beings from the Sirius star system who arrived in a spinning arc and taught them about the invisible companion star Sirius B, which Western astronomy only confirmed in 1862. In Australia, the Aboriginal peoples speak of the Wandjina, sky beings with no mouths, large eyes and halos who came down in the dreamtime, shaped the land, and painted their own images on rock walls before returning upward. In North America, the Hopi speak of the ant people, tall, thin beings with large heads who led humans into underground shelters during 2 previous world destructions, taught them survival skills, and departed to the stars. Do you see the pattern? Different names, different art styles, different languages, but the same core story. Beings who came from the sky or the water, who were not human, who taught critical knowledge, who left physical traces, and who promised to return. Carl Jung would say these are archetypes, universal symbols hardwired into the human psyche. But archetypes don't teach you the 50-year orbital period of an invisible star. Archetypes don't show you how to calculate precession. Archetypes don't tell you about companion stars that require telescopes to see. The doggone knowledge is real. French anthropologists Marcel Griaule and German Dieterlen documented it in the 1930s and 40s, long before the information could have been contaminated by modern astronomy. The doggone drew the orbit of Sirius B accurately, described it as extremely heavy and white, and said it takes 50 years to complete one cycle. All correct, all impossible for a pre-industrial culture to know without advanced instruments. When researchers asked how they knew, the elders simply said, "The Namo told us." Now let's get theoretical for a minute, because there's a concept in physics and biology that might explain why this keeps happening. It's called a thermodynamic attractor. The idea is simple. Whenever certain conditions align, complex systems naturally organize themselves into similar patterns. Life itself is a thermodynamic attractor. Given the right conditions, liquid water, carbon chemistry, energy flow, life will emerge. Not might, will. Some scientists argue that intelligence works the same way. Whenever you have sufficient energy throughput, environmental instability that rewards prediction, and entropy optimization, high-level intelligence becomes likely. If this is true, then intelligence isn't rare. It's inevitable. It's a natural expression of how complex systems evolve on any planet with the right conditions. Earth has had the right conditions for a very long time, not just for the last 300,000 years, for hundreds of millions of years. Fossil fuels, the energy source that powered our industrial revolution, have existed since the Carboniferous period. That's 350 million years ago. Plenty of time for multiple cycles of intelligence to rise, flourish, and collapse. And here's the thing about deep time. A civilization lasting 100,000 years would appear in the geological record as a single, instantaneous event. A spike, a blip, easily mistaken for a volcanic eruption or a meteorite impact unless you know exactly what to look for. How many blips have we missed? How many hyperthermal events, extinction boundaries, and isotope anomalies are sitting in geological databases right now, labeled as natural, that might not be? The Silurian hypothesis wasn't proposing that an ancient civilization definitely existed. It was proposing that we develop the tools to look properly, to test the idea rigorously instead of dismissing it out of hand. And the more scientists actually start looking, the more uncomfortable the data becomes. Here's something most people don't think about. Earth is a terrible place to preserve evidence of ancient civilizations, but the moon is perfect. No wind, no rain, no tectonic activity, no erosion. A footprint on the moon could last 100 million years. A structure could last even longer. If any previous Earth civilization achieved even basic spaceflight, the moon would be the most logical place to find proof, and we've barely looked. Humans have directly explored about 0.05% of the lunar surface, 0.05%. The rest has only been photographed from orbit, and even then, not at high enough resolution to spot small artifacts. In 2018, a team of researchers proposed using machine learning to scan orbital imagery for geometric anomalies, shapes that are too regular, too aligned, too structured to be natural. The project was quietly shelved, funding disappeared, but some of the preliminary results leaked. There are anomalies, dozens of them, rectangular features, aligned edges, structures that don't match any known volcanic or impact formation. Are they artificial? Nobody knows, because nobody's gone to check. Mars has similar anomalies. The famous face on Mars turned out to be a natural mesa, but there are other features that haven't been explained. Perfectly circular depressions in areas with no volcanic activity, linear formations that look like walls or canals, objects that show up in multiple images but seem to change position. Again, probably natural, but probably isn't the same as certainly. And the fact that we're not investigating these more aggressively should tell you something. Because if we did find something, it would shatter everything. The entire human story would have to be rewritten. Maybe that's why we're not looking. Not really. It's easier to assume we're alone, we're first, we're special, because the alternative is terrifying. So let's put all of this together. Let's connect the dots. You have geological evidence of industrial-scale disruptions millions of years ago. You have archaeological sites that don't fit the human timeline. You have a sudden, unexplained leap in human cognitive and technological capability around 10,000 years ago. You have global mythologies that all tell the same story about non-human teachers. And you have potential physical evidence sitting on the moon and Mars that nobody wants to investigate. Each piece by itself is questionable, debatable, easy to dismiss. But together they form a pattern, and the pattern suggests something that should be impossible. That we're not the first, that intelligence has risen on Earth before, maybe many times, and every time something happened, a collapse, a catastrophe, a reset. And each time the survivors forgot. Not slowly, not gradually, catastrophically. Think about what it would take to make an entire species forget its own history. Not just forget the details, but forget that there even was a history to remember. You'd need an event so traumatic, so devastating, that it would wipe out not just cities and libraries, but the very concept of what came before. The Younger Dryas event, 12,800 years ago, might have been exactly that. A comet impact, multiple airbursts across the northern hemisphere, wildfires, megafaunal extinction, a 1,200-year-long climate freeze followed by catastrophic flooding as ice dams burst and sea levels rose 400 feet. Coastal civilizations erased, survivors scattered, knowledge fragmented. And here's the thing. Genetic studies show that human population bottlenecked during that exact period. We were reduced to maybe 10,000 to 20,000 breeding individuals worldwide, a near-extinction event. The people who survived didn't have books. They had stories, oral traditions, warnings passed from parent to child around campfires. Remember the ones who came before. Remember the teachers. Remember the sky opening. Remember the flood. Remember that we were not always alone. And those stories became myths, and the myths became religions, and the religions became folklore. And eventually, we forgot what they were really about. We turned our teachers into gods. We turned our history into fantasy. We convinced ourselves that intelligence began with us. But every now and then, someone digs up a bone that's too old, or finds a site that's too advanced, or decodes a myth that's too accurate. And the forgetting cracks, just a little, just enough to make you wonder. What did we forget? Who were we before the flood? And who taught us how to rebuild? There's one more thing I need to tell you, one more pattern that might be the most disturbing of all. In almost every culture that preserved these stories, the teachers didn't just leave. They're still watching. The Hopi say the ant people are waiting for the right time to return. The Dogon say the Namo are monitoring us from Sirius. The Aboriginal elders say the Wandjina will come back when the world needs to be renewed. The Mesopotamians believe the Apkallu left their knowledge in hidden texts, guarded until the appointed time. Even modern UFO and UAP reports, when you strip away the cultural overlay, describe the same thing. Beings observing, not interfering directly but watching, studying. The US government's recent acknowledgement of UAPs is the first time in history that mainstream institutions have admitted there are objects in our skies that we can't explain. Objects that move in ways that violate our understanding of physics. Objects that seem to show up more frequently around nuclear facilities, military installations, and moments of high technological activity. What if they're not visitors? What if they never left? What if Earth is still being monitored by whoever was here before? Either because they're our creators, our ancestors, or simply because they're conducting the longest experiment in history. There's a concept in evolutionary biology called punctuated equilibrium. The idea that species don't evolve gradually. They stay stable for long periods, then suddenly leap forward in short bursts. Human evolution shows that pattern. Long periods of stasis, then sudden jumps. The appearance of the hand axe, the mastery of fire, the explosion of symbolic thought, the agricultural revolution. What if those jumps weren't random? What if something was nudging us along, not controlling us but occasionally stepping in to keep the experiment running? Teach them fire, give them seeds, show them the stars, then step back and watch what they do with it. And maybe every few thousand years check back in, make sure the lesson stuck. The mythologies don't describe gods who demanded worship. They describe teachers who gave knowledge, warnings about what happens if that knowledge is misused, and promises to return. The Hopi prophecies say we're living in the fourth world. The previous three worlds ended because humanity became corrupt, violent, and forgot the sacred balance. Each time, the ant people saved a few, and each time those few were given another chance. But the prophecy also says the fourth world is ending, and the fifth world is beginning. And when it does, the teachers will return, not to save everyone this time, but to see who learned the lesson. The Mayan long count calendar, which ended a cycle on December 21, 2012, was never about the end of the world. It was about the end of a period of isolation. The elders say that date marked the moment when humanity would either step forward into awareness or continue down the path of destruction. We chose the latter. Wars, ecological collapse, division, technological advancement without wisdom. All the signs the prophecies warned against. So what happens now? Are the teachers watching? Are they disappointed? Are they waiting for us to wake up? Or have they already written us off and moved on to the next experiment? Let me take you back to something tangible, something you can see with your own eyes if you know where to look. Around the world, there are structures that don't make sense. Megalithic constructions built with precision that we struggle to replicate even today. Pumapunku in Bolivia. Stone blocks weighing over 100 tons, cut with perfectly flat surfaces and 90-degree angles accurate to a fraction of a millimeter. Interlocking H-shaped blocks that fit together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Drill holes that spiral inward at angles that are mechanically impossible with Bronze Age tools. Engineers have tried to replicate these blocks using only the technology the ancient Andean people supposedly had. They failed. The bronze tools wore out in minutes. The precision was impossible. The angles couldn't be achieved. Yet there the stones sit, thousands of years old, waiting. The locals never claimed they built them. They told the Spanish conquistadors that the stones were already ancient when they arrived, that they were made by Viracocha in the time before the flood, when the gods walked the earth and could turn stones soft like clay. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, 11,600 years old, massive T-shaped pillars carved with animals, arranged in circular formations, buried intentionally after use. Built by hunter-gatherers who supposedly had no concept of organized labor, no written language, no cities. Yet the precision is incredible. The pillars weigh up to 20 tons. They're carved from bedrock, transported and erected without metal tools or wheels. Mainstream archaeology calls it a temple, but temples are built by civilizations, by people who have already established agriculture, governance, and social hierarchy. Göbekli Tepe predates all of that. It's not the product of a civilization. It's what came before civilization. The question is, who taught them to build it? The Great Pyramid of Giza. We're told it was built around 2560 BCE by Pharaoh Khufu using copper tools, wooden sledges, and ramps. But here's what they don't tell you. The pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60 of a single degree. The sides are equal to within a few centimeters across a base that's 230 meters long. The internal chambers are built with granite blocks weighing 70 tons, transported from quarries 800 kilometers away, and fitted so precisely that you can't slide a sheet of paper between them. And here's the real kicker. The entire structure is a precise scale model of the northern hemisphere. The dimensions encode the value of pi, the circumference of the Earth, and the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Either the ancient Egyptians had advanced mathematics, global mapping capabilities, and knowledge of cosmic distances thousands of years before anyone else, or they were working from a blueprint they didn't create. The Egyptian texts themselves admit they didn't invent this knowledge. It came from the Zep Tepi, the first time when the Neteru walked among humans. Every pharaoh's job was to maintain what was given, to preserve the legacy, not to innovate but to remember. Exploration Part 9, The Serious Mystery. Let's go back to the Dogon for a second, because their story is so specific, so verifiable, that it deserves more attention. The Dogon live in Mali. They're a small, isolated tribe with no written language and no access to telescopes, yet they've known about Sirius B for centuries. Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky. Anyone can see it, but Sirius B is different. It's a white dwarf star, incredibly dense, roughly the mass of the Sun compressed into a sphere the size of Earth. It's invisible to the naked eye. It was only discovered in 1862 when astronomer Alvin Clark spotted it through a telescope. The Dogon not only knew it existed, they knew it was small, dense, white, and orbited Sirius A every 50 years. All correct. They also described Sirius C, a second companion that Western science didn't confirm until the 1990s. When anthropologists asked how they knew, the elders said, "The Namo told us." The Namo, according to Dogon cosmology, were amphibious beings who descended from Sirius in a spinning craft that made fire and noise. They had fish-like bodies, green skin, and glowing red eyes. They taught the Dogon agriculture, metallurgy, and the structure of the cosmos. Then they returned to their water world and continued to watch. Skeptics say the knowledge must have been contaminated, that French anthropologists or missionaries must have leaked the information. Except the documentation predates the modern confirmation of Sirius B's properties, and the information was kept secret, revealed only to initiated priests who earned trust after years of study. There's no clean way to dismiss this. Either the Dogon had telescopes we don't know about, they guessed right by an astronomical coincidence, or they're telling the truth. Someone told them, someone who knew. Exploration Part 10, The Current Evidence. Now let's talk about right now, today, because the phenomenon hasn't stopped. In 2004, Navy pilots off the coast of San Diego encountered something that shouldn't exist. The Tic-Tac UFO. It was captured on infrared video, tracked on multiple radar systems, and witnessed by multiple trained observers. It moved in ways that violated physics. Instant acceleration, right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds, no visible propulsion. It jammed radar. It anticipated the pilot's movements. The Pentagon released the footage in 2020. They confirmed it was real, unidentified, and displayed technology beyond anything in our current arsenal. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's official government acknowledgement. Since then, the U.S. has established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office to investigate UAPs. NASA has created a UAP study team. Congress has held hearings with military whistleblowers testifying under oath about recovered non-human technology. Whether you believe them or not, the conversation has shifted. We're no longer debating if there's something in the skies. We're debating what it is and who's operating it. Some say foreign adversaries, China, Russia, secret programs. But the objects show up in historical records going back thousands of years. Medieval manuscripts describe glowing orbs. Renaissance paintings show disc-shaped objects in the sky. Ancient carvings depict flying craft. If it's modern human technology, it's been modern for a very long time. The alternative is harder to swallow, but fits the data better. They were here before, they never left, and they're still watching. So here's where we are. You have geological evidence suggesting previous industrial activity. You have archaeological sites that predate accepted human timelines. You have mythology that describes the same non-human teachers across every continent. You have megalithic structures we can't explain. You have astronomical knowledge that should be impossible. You have modern UAP encounters that match ancient descriptions. And you have one species, Homo sapiens, that suddenly went from cave paintings to moon landings in less than 12,000 years. A blink in evolutionary time. What if we didn't do it alone? What if we were never meant to do it alone? What if Earth is a classroom? A long-term experiment in watching intelligence develop under specific conditions. And every few thousand years, the teachers check in, adjust the lesson plan, and see how we're progressing. The ancients didn't worship gods in the way we think of worship. They remembered teachers. They preserved the knowledge they were given. They built monuments aligned to the stars because they were told the stars mattered. And when cataclysms came, when the floods rose and the fires burned, the survivors didn't start from scratch. They rebuilt using the knowledge that had been saved. The seed vaults, the oral traditions, the sacred texts. The Hopi say the ant people led them underground during 2 destructions. The Sumerians say the Apkallu taught them how to survive the deluge. The Egyptians say the Neteru gave them the wisdom of the first time. Every culture has the same story because it's not a story, it's a memory. A memory of the time when we were not alone, when the sky opened and someone stepped through and said, "Here, let me show you how to start again." So what does all of this mean? What are we supposed to do with this information? First, we need to accept that the story we've been told, the story of human exceptionalism and isolation, is incomplete at best and completely wrong at worst. We're not the first intelligent species on Earth. We might not even be the only current one. Second, we need to start looking properly, not dismissing anomalies because they're uncomfortable, not burying evidence because it doesn't fit the paradigm. We need rigorous, open scientific investigation into deep-time geological markers for past industrial activity, high-resolution surveys of the Moon and Mars for artificial structures, redating and reanalysis of anomalous archaeological sites using modern techniques, computational analysis of global mythology to track information transfer across millennia, serious study of UAPs without stigma or dismissal. Third, and this is the hardest part, we need to confront the possibility that we're being watched, that whoever taught us is still here, still observing, still waiting to see if we learn the lesson. And if the prophecies are right, if the cycles are real, then we're at the end of one age and the beginning of another. The fourth world is ending, the fifth is starting, and when the teachers return, they're going to ask one question. What did you do with what we gave you? Agriculture, we turned it into monocultures and soil depletion. Fire and metallurgy, we turned them into weapons. Writing and mathematics, we turned them into tools of control. Technology, we turned it into surveillance and destruction. We were given knowledge, we were given time, we were given a planet. And we're in the process of destroying all three. Maybe that's why the UAPs are showing up more frequently now. Not to invade, not to interfere, but to watch, to document, to see if this iteration of humanity makes it or joins the previous ones in the geological graveyard. The Hopi prophecy says that in the final days, we'll have two paths. The path of technology without wisdom leads to destruction. The path of balance, humility, and remembering the sacred leads to continuation. We're choosing the first path. We're choosing it every day. And the ones who taught us, they're waiting to see if we correct course before it's too late. Because here's the final, most unsettling thought. What if the reason we keep finding evidence of previous civilizations rising and falling isn't because Earth is special? What if it's because this is the experiment? What if Earth is the testing ground? The place where intelligence is seeded, nurtured, guided, and ultimately judged on whether it can transcend its own destructive tendencies? And what if most civilizations fail? What if we're not the first version of humanity? What if we're iteration 27 or 152 or 1000? Each one given the same tools, the same knowledge, the same chance, and each one eventually choosing violence, greed, and short-sightedness over cooperation, wisdom, and long-term thinking. The geological record shows mass extinction events every few million years. Resets, clean slates. What if those aren't natural? What if they're intentional? What if the teachers don't just watch passively? What if they judge? And when a species proves itself incapable of moving beyond self-destruction, they press reset and start again. It's a terrifying thought, but it fits the data. The mirror. And here's the final twist, the one that should keep you up at night. Every tool we're developing to detect ancient civilizations, geochemical analysis, stratigraphic modeling, isotope dating, pattern recognition, every single technique is also a mirror. We're not just looking for them. We're creating a forensic manual for how we'll be forgotten. Because in a million years, maybe 10 million, when the continents have shifted and the ice has come and gone again, what will be left of us? Not the cities, not the machines, not the internet or the satellites or the monuments. Just a thin layer in the rock, a spike in carbon isotopes, a scatter of microplastics, a brief pulse of radioactive cesium from our nuclear tests. The next species to rise, the next iteration of intelligence, will do exactly what we're doing now. They'll dig through the layers. They'll find the anomalies. They'll debate whether we were real or just a natural fluctuation. And somewhere, in a database we haven't discovered, or a moon base we haven't found, or a dimension we can't access, the teachers will watch them too, waiting to see if they learn what we refused to. That intelligence without wisdom is just another extinction event waiting to happen. That technology without humility is just a faster way to destroy yourself. And that forgetting where you came from is the most dangerous amnesia of all. The return. The ancient texts all say the same thing. They will return, not might, will. The Hopi say the true Pahana will come back when the fifth world begins. The Maya say the end of the long count marks the return of the gods. The Christians say the second coming. The Hindus say the return of Kalki. The Buddhists say the arrival of Maitreya. Different names, same event. The teachers are coming back, and they're coming back soon. Every prophecy, every calendar, every warning carved in stone points to this time. Right now, the 21st century, the transition point. We're not ready, we're not even close. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the test isn't whether we're ready, it's whether we can remember who we are before it's too late. Who we were before we forgot. Who we could become if we chose wisdom over weapons. The evidence is everywhere. In the rocks, in the myths, in the stars, in the skies above us right now. They didn't arrive. They were already here before humanity, and they never left. They're watching, waiting, hopping maybe, that this time we'll get it right. The question is, will we? If this changed how you see the world, you know what to do next.